Hello. Welcome to United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey. I will answer your question after the talk, but welcome in. There's, I think, a couple people who are probably going to be wandering their way down here and need time to get settled. Uh, s- Hello to the people online because that is right. We do live stream this on YouTube and Twitch. So if you're ever at home wondering what to do on a Saturday night, you can always hop on by at 8 p.m. Eastern because I do know a couple of you out there live at various places in the United States and elsewhere. Um, that being said, you can also check us out on our website, uacnj.org. It's where you're going to find a list of all our upcoming talks, talks we've done in the past, and links to them, because we do save these talks in our online archive in YouTube. So you could, if there was one, you're like, oh darn, I missed learning about the James Webb Telescope and what it's been up to these past 2 years that we did last week. You can always go back and check that out. You can also check us out on our social media pages, our Facebook, our Instagram. We have a Discord server. Feel free to ask questions in those, say hi, share your astrophotography. And, any questions, like I said, feel free to ask them. For the people here, unfortunately, you guys get to sit through a safety briefing. So, yes, I did manage to turn the red light on. If you need to use the porta pot, or if you need to use the restroom, it is the porta potty in the back to your right, my left. It is illuminated by red, so it will be easy to find. I know last week I forgot and I got yelled at. We also have a little museum and gift shop area here where you can. I'll be manning after the talk because still they have not given me the ability to be in two places at once. When we do go to leave here, we do try and keep, or we don't try, we do use our headlights. Headlights are important for not running people over or getting run over, so do use them. At the same token, if we are using flashlights to get around, do keep your lights pointed towards the ground because we don't need to unnecessarily blind people because we're having a flashlight rave. We do have volunteers with various telescopes set up in each of the roll-off sheds, and they would be more than happy to tell you about anything there afterwards. We are in Jenny Jump State Park. We do partner with the state park system, so if you're ever also looking for a fun camping trip or whatnot, you can always check out Jenny Jump State Park, and they have little campsites and cabins and trails and all that fun stuff. But the reason you're really here is tonight's talk. You bought a telescope. Well, now what? This talk is given by Paul Fischer. Paul has a bachelor in engineering and chemical engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology and has worked in environmental and chemical industries. Though always interested in celestial objects, Paul's official start, like many, was one night, several years ago, lying in awkward positions in the cold, because winter's, of course, the best time to view any astronomical object, and where he caught a brief, clear glimpse of the Galilean moons of Jupiter. After that, he's hooked, and now we have trapped him here, and he can't run away, despite his best attempts. He does volunteer at UACNJ here and is an active member of Northwest Jersey Amateur Astronomers, one of our member clubs, and still manages to find himself out here frequently freezing his butt off in awkward positions staring at the sky. With that, here's Paul.
Hi, everyone. And I am Paul, and thank you, Kim, for the introduction. I just want to also point out, and we do a good job of going through this, but we are a volunteer organization. So if you do like what you saw here and the views you can see through the telescope, there's a donation jug right here or in each of the observatory buildings or inside. If the spirit moves you, please do generate. We operate on a little bit of a shoestring budget a wing and a prayer. So please, every dollar that you do give goes a long way. So we would appreciate that. All right, I'm going to switch modes here. I'm going to get rid of this and start the program I prepared for this evening. And here we go. And looks good. You bought a telescope, now what? And a lot of people will just jump in and buy a telescope. A lot of the introductory books that you might buy on this hobby actually recommend that you don't do that right away. So I didn't do that 100%. I did, as Kim said, started with a pair of binoculars and looking up in the sky, but then I quickly bought a telescope. Some books recommend that you wait a year before looking at stuff in the sky. Why a year? Right.
It gives you time
this
to
isn't a
save
cheap
up.
hobby, so that it does make some financial sense to make sure that you want to go through it. But also, there's a physical reason, and that physical reason is because it takes how long to get around the sun. So to see the entire sky, you would have to wait a year to see it. So that's part of it. All right, and also don't forget, you might have noticed this is our programs page on our website, and you might have noticed you can't read these right now, but I'd like to specifically mention Ken Taylor, Dan Kirby, and Mike Spalletti, who also all have an introductory to astronomy talk that is given up here. So you have many opportunities, and they all have different focuses. And these gentlemen have done an excellent job putting a presentation together. So please also take a look at their introductory to astronomy presentations. A war story already? Well, the good news is that in my bio, Kim took care of the war story already, so you don't have to listen to it again. But they are interesting. It was sitting on a roof, and actually I ended up lying down because it's very advantageous to hold the binoculars very still so you can actually see something. And then I looked up at a particularly bright object in the sky. I had no clue what I was looking at. I guessed it was a planet just from general knowledge, but I had no clue, and I didn't know. And I saw something similar to this. Now it's very dim, this photograph for our live audience, so I put in some arrows to help with that. But you might be able, if you're in our live audience, to pick out the little dots underneath the arrows here. And those little dots are something that makes this object very interesting. And this is something very like what you might see in a good pair of binoculars on your own, looking at them. So you can see these objects, and these 4 objects that have arrows associated with them are actually the Galilean moons of Jupiter. All right, and they are called the Galilean moons because some famous guy saw them and made some conclusions based on them, and we started ushering in some of the most impactful science that the modern society has ever seen based on these observations. So that was indeed Jupiter. And one of the motivating reasons why I thought it was cool, I'm an engineer. First of all, I've always thought science was cool. But now I am observing for myself and experiencing myself, and it was not discovery for humanity, but discovery for myself, some of the science that happened hundreds of years ago. And so Sir Isaac Newton is credited with the popularization of this quote If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And we'll get into some of the history of that, a little bit more color to it than just what it appears. But maybe originally penned, or at least the earliest mention of a similar type of sentiment we can find is Bernard of Chartres. Oh boy, where's the notes? Chartres. Bernard of Chartres. If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And of course, that's very impactful way of looking at science, and very impactful to a general approach, a general philosophy, is that we build, as humans, we build on our knowledge based on great thinkers or any thinker that has happened previous to us, right? So we are experiencing what you're going to see tonight based on a lot of technological and a lot of scientific advancement over hundreds or thousands of years when it comes to astronomy. So a very important concept. However, Sir Isaac Newton might not have necessarily been so forward thinking when he made that quote. He did have a antagonistic rivalry with Robert Hooke, and some historians propose that this was specifically a dig at Robert Hooke, who did not necessarily ascribe to the same philosophy that Isaac Newton did. However, you know, only those two gentlemen maybe know the reality of that that bent to the bend to the quote. Certainly, it's still a meaningful quote for us. Copernicus, Galileo, Kepler, Newton, and so many others. We are enjoying our current knowledge based on these giants, and we get a chance to see it. That's cool. Was there a point to that story? Yes. Well, you've got it. Why is you've got a telescope? You've got a telescope now. What pertinent? What is a model, and why are they relevant? And why is amateur astronomy a really cool pursuit? And hopefully we can answer some of these questions today. All right, let's go into the models one right away. What is a model? A model is a simplified representation of an imagined reality that enables predictions to be developed and tested by experiment. At least that's the science version of what a model is, right? And that's kind of cool. It gives a little bit of insight to the scientific method. It tells about testing, which is a very important part of science, right? The difference between science and other philosophical approaches to knowledge is that science needs to test conclusions by experimentation. Okay? I need to see the numbers in order to believe it. That's science. Science, philosophy, religion, etc. universally agree that humans exclusively use models to understand reality. That's true, right? No, not at all. That is a philosophical question that has been debated since there has been philosophy. Can we experience objective reality directly? And the answer is probably no. Considering the fact that we know that particle physics exists, that we have really very little reference to, it impacts us very indirectly, and things on a grander scale, cosmologically, likely don't impact us very much in our day-to-day life either, right? So there is certainly, at least, a variance based on the scale or your frame of reference. So certainly models help us understand things that we are not directly experiencing, or whose direct experience is a little difficult for us to get into our heads. So models are very useful. All right. For instance, the celestial sphere. Where did I, well, there we go. Sorry. All right. For instance, we know that there was a debate back in history between the geocentric and the heliocentric model, whether the Earth was the center of the universe or the sun was the center of the universe, or maybe, as we learned later, in modern times, it's the center of our solar system only, and not particularly interesting otherwise. All right? So that was a very contentious debate, in fact, wasn't it? People were put to death or sentenced to a life at at home. Some of the most notable scientists of the time, for suggesting that the Earth was not the center of the universe. We have since learned that the reality of that situation is that the star, our sun, and our planet around it is not particularly interesting, except to us, but for the rest of the universe, it's pretty typical. However, we're going to forget that we know that, because we're going to use a model. And that model helps us understand what's going on in the sky. We know it's wrong, but it helps us figure the sky out a lot easier. So we use it because it's a model to help our understanding. This is called the celestial sphere. On the celestial sphere, you imagine us on that little blue dot there, looking up at this sphere. So we're looking through the inside to the inside of that sphere. On that sphere, we superimpose the North Pole, the South Pole, the equator, the equinoxes we know are also there because they that is defined as by this line crossing the equator. So those familiar poles and that familiar equator are superimposed. They just go straight up and are superimposed on that celestial sphere. However, we're introducing this new line, this new ellipse that is called the ecliptic plane. And that is the plane that is made by the sun and the earth. And it's made by the earth because we have nothing if not hubris. And we have defined the ecliptic plane between the earth and the sun. However, the rest of the solar system being pretty darn flat, lies along that ecliptic plane. So this ecliptic plane is like 23 degrees off of our poles. And so that's the tilt of the Earth that everyone remembers, right? However, in our model, north and south is still up and down, but instead of the we just define up and down being that straight, and then the ecliptic is actually tilted. So we're just looking at it like this, basically. All right, and we don't have a lot of kids in the. We have one. You come on up. I will. Do you want to be the sun today? Sure. You look like you would make an excellent candidate for the sun, so we will do that. The sun's the easy job, so just hold that in front of the audience, and I'm going to be these two things. Generica is just an object. Looks like a planet, but it's just an object in the sky we want to take a look at. It can be any object, and will be two different objects in this example. And I'm setting up for the summer, so I want to make sure I get that right, because sometimes I get things a little backwards. But here we go. In this model here, I have in fact tilted us back. This is actually about 22 degrees, and we are actually the observers here and here. We are actually the observers here in these two possible locations. Of course, at night we have to look away from the sun, right? So we're looking at this object in the ecliptic plane, away from the sun, and you'll notice here that in summer, it is summer because the observers in the northern hemisphere are tilted towards the sun and are getting more sun every day, right? But you'll also notice that at night, that same observer on the other, when the planet turns around and looks the other way, that you actually have to look further down in the sky to see objects at night. So the sun is high, but the ecliptic plane, the planets, are low. All right? Sun, could you take a step over this way, please? And hold up again. Excellent. One more time. And of course, on the opposite side here, we have the reverse situation. At night, during winter, correct, the sun is low, and we are getting less sun, and therefore it is colder in the northern hemisphere. But the ecliptic plane that the planets travel is higher in the sky, and we get to see more cool stuff in the sky lower in the sky. That's lower in the sky. Okay, so thank you very much, and a big hand for our sun, everybody. So that's the power of the celestial sphere helping us understand what's going on in the sky. So we're going to continue using that model. Further, as I said before, some introductory astronomy books say, hey, you should wait a year. That's because amateur astronomy is big, all right? And how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So the whole idea that you can jump with the telescope and see everything you want to see immediately, you need patience for this hobby. In order to see everything, it's going to take you at least 1 year. And then think about the everything that we're talking about, the universe. So you will not see everything in your entire lifetime. All right? You'll see a lot, and you'll see maybe all the things that you're willing to spend money to see. But you won't. But just remember, you have the entire universe to look at, and there's many techniques and many things to learn. So be patient, take it one step at a time or one bite at a time. All right, let's talk a little bit about equipment. What can we use? The different telescopes. I like this particular light path diagram of this telescope, or refractor. And the reason I like it is because not only does it show you what a refractor does, which has an object lens and then a eyepiece that then beams the image into your eye. However, so it shows you that the middle, say, and the edges of the image cross, has an image here that the eyepiece then focuses on, and then at the correct exit pupil, you will see that image in focus at your eye. However, additionally, you'll also see that not only does a telescope require this objective lens or objective mirror, but it also requires this eyepiece in order to function. So any telescope will have those two components. Here is a Newtonian. My own telescope is set up there, and I'll invite you to drive my telescope later on this evening. However, it has a mirror at the end, so it takes 1, 2 passes through. It then gets bounced off of this flat 45-degree angle mirror and then goes out the side. This mirror is the objective mirror, and then it again goes out an eyepiece here. Why does this not have a hole in it? So I looking through here, why do I look in there and there wouldn't be a hole in the image? It's a tough question. What's happening is that all of these rays that are coming in from whatever object, especially an astronomical object, are coming in are all parallel. They are so far away. Think about it driving along in your car, looking out the window. The stuff next to you goes by really quick. The stuff far away goes by really slow. All right, now think of an object that is light years away instead of miles away. Light years away instead of miles away. That object goes by really slow. So what that's basically saying is that the image here and the image here and the image anywhere entering the telescope is the same image. So you see the same image regardless of having something small in the way. The only thing you might notice that if your eye's really good is if this object is too big and blocks too much light, is that you'll get a dimming of the image because you're getting less light because that thing is in the way. So you get to see the same object, it might just be a little dimmer. But well-designed telescopes, you won't notice it. All right, another popular telescope, many of which are set up on the lawn or in the observatories, are this catadioptric type configuration, and this is a Schmidt-Cassegrain, where it travels not twice like the Newtonian did, but 3 times through it. So it's a very compact scope because it's actually 3 times longer than what you're looking at, just because of the light path. So what's a telescope's purpose? Telescope's main job, we can all agree to this, is to make small objects that are far away bigger to look at, right? Yeah, that's a trap because that's not the only purpose. It collects light. It's a light bucket. All right, here's what happens is that any object that shines at us, that radiates from something, is subject to flux by the cross-sectional area you're viewing it through. So the cross-sectional area, everyone knows, on a circle varies with the square of the radius, correct? So that's why we have a square here. We have the radius squared. So the naked eye, we know, is about 6 millimeters in diameter, making the radius 3 millimeters, and we just divide it by itself, the 9 here, to come up with the quantity 1, because we're using that as the reference. A 4-inch telescope has a cross-sectional area ratio of 287, and the 8-inch telescope about 1,200 times. That means the amount of light that you are collecting through an 8-inch telescope is 1,200 times what you would collect through your eye. One eye. I should have put that in there, but that's one eye. Now, that is why one never looks at the sun without properly shielding the objective side of your telescope from the sun's rays, because you're multiplying it by a large number and then feeding it into your eye. You're already told not to look at it with your naked eye. I'm sure most people do, even though you're told not to, but definitely don't do it with a telescope. All right, so we talked about the objective lenses. We talked about a little bit how all that works. We talked about how its light gathering power is as important as its ability to magnify. Let's talk about the other end, the eyepieces. The eyepieces, these are all examples up here of typical eyepieces. They can be as common as the Plössl and then proprietary like the Nagler. Multiple or compound lenses with coatings are used to eliminate image distortion, aberration. So it can separate the colors if you don't do it right, if you don't use the right coatings, and it can do other things. So all these eyepieces are designed with multiple lenses in them and multiple coatings to prevent that from happening. Because if you just put a regular just prism in there, what happens? You get a rainbow, right? And you don't want a rainbow when you're looking at cool stuff in the sky. So these eyepieces are actually as complicated as the telescopes themselves. And so you might expect that they're about as expensive as the telescopes themselves, and you'd be about right. They are a little cheaper because they're smaller and compact, but good eyepieces can cost as much as a medium price telescope. So that isn't to be underestimated when one wants to start investing in this hobby. The focal length is expressed in millimeters and is typically right on the eyepiece, so you know what you're looking at. You can get them in two standard sizes, 1 1/4 inch versus a 2 inch. The 2 inch will give you a larger field of view. Medium grade eyepieces can rival a beginner's scope value. I said that. There's different special types of eyepieces, a reticle, a Barlow, or an angle viewer. You can look at those just to realize that some of those things do some cool things that you might want to invest in. And then my suggestion is learn your scope with your default eyepieces, because all the companies where you buy a telescope from will give you at least one eyepiece to look through, and start using it with that, and just don't invest in eyepieces immediately. Look it through there and say, man, I really wish that was bigger. I really wish that was clearer. Whatever it was, and then find an eyepiece to do that thing, rather than just invest in a bunch of eyepieces. Some eyepiece terminology is exit pupil, that's the image height exiting the eyepiece. Eye relief, how close your eye has to be to achieve that image focus. A apparent field of view, which is a inherent to the eyepiece itself. And the manufacturer always gives you that number, or should, but my experience, they do. And then the true field of view, which is a calculation which we'll go into based on the focal length of your telescope versus that focal length. Where did I mention focal length? Oh, the apparent field of view, the focal length of your eyepiece. It's simply a ratio. So you have the telescope, you have your eyepieces, you're ready to go, except you're now floating in air instead of somehow connected to the ground. Let's talk about mounts a little bit. There's two types: the altitude azimuth mount, the alt-az mount. It's easy to set up and it is intuitive. It's artillery-like. It's like aiming artillery. How far up and left or right. That's not exactly how they aim artillery. There's a much more to it than that. However, it's like you were playing that line art game from back in the DOS days of artillery, up or down, left or right. And then they're telescope centric. So up or down, left or right, it only knows where it's pointing. It does not know where in the sky it's currently pointing, the alt-azimuth mounts. It's not sky centric, it's telescope centric. An equatorial mount, however, is harder to set up and less intuitive to move, so I wouldn't recommend that being your first mount, although if you feel that you are very spatially aware and you got a handle on it, you can give it a shot. A lot of them are equipped with electromechanical tracking, and in fact, the reason why you go through all that heartache to set it up is so that you can get to this tracking idea. And then it's sky-centric. Back in the mechanical days, they used setting circles, nowadays, of course, it's computer-driven. They still come with the setting circles typically, but you can find objects in the sky based on that information, setting circles or computer, because the coordinate system is based in the sky. So it's no longer telescope-centric. And of course, you can get either of these types of mounts in a push-to and go-to, where it's computer-controlled. Modern electronics, computers, and controllers for amateur astronomy makes your mount choice less critical, although I would say that serious astrophotographers still use equatorial mounts for the best results. Other accessories are a red flashlight, regular flashlight, some sort of finder, a fixed focus finder scope, a telrad, some sort of green laser pointer, just so everyone else around watching you do that can know what you're looking at. Broadband filter, just to, if you're in a light polluted area, helps with finding some of the dimmer objects. A case to carry around your scope in, and a bench or chair, because when I was looking at Jupiter lying on a roof to keep myself steady while I was looking through those binoculars, the same thing applies when you're looking through a telescope. The more that you stay motionless, the less it's jiggly in what you're looking through in the telescope. All right, here's some vision tips. You can use this as any star party, but especially critical if you yourself have a scope. It takes 30 to 45 minutes for full adjustment of your rod cells. Those are the cells on the outside of your vision. The black and white ones that see better in the dark. Use averted vision. So don't look directly at the object. You might notice tonight when you're looking around at things that if you look directly at it where the cone cells are in your eye, that you don't see things as well in the dark than you see in your periphery. You will actually see them better in your periphery than you will right in front of your face. That's because the rod cells are better at night vision. So you use that same concept looking in the telescope. Don't look directly at it necessarily, look slightly off. Motion helps. Not only does the telescope can move, but you can actually move your eyes around, and that still counts as motion as far as your brain's concerned. Your brain keys in very strongly due to our past evolution, because we were typically running away from a lot of things maybe back then that could have eaten us, and what we want to do is be aware of them even at night and be able to see them. So your brain through evolution keys in on things that move. And finally, surface brightness. Deep sky objects that, like a star, when you, especially in a amateur telescope, still remains a point of light. It doesn't have a quote-unquote surface brightness. However, if you're looking at a large nebulae, or if you're looking at a large galaxy, or you're looking at even a planet, the more you expand the image that you are looking at, the more it is spread over an area, and the dimmer the object, each piece of that object becomes. So you can actually out-magnify your ability to see that object. You have to try real hard, but it's theoretically possible to zoom in so much that you don't have enough light to see that object anymore, at least in your current equipment, any given piece of equipment. All right, learning the sky, and I'm reminding you there about the elephant. Uh, lose the scope, the piece of equipment, and appreciate the scope. All right, learning the sky will help you have fun in the hobby because it'll be that much easier to learn things. Understand navigation aids. Understand that your brain cheats and that you need to challenge it to prevent it from cheating. And then finally, sky parties and other events are highly recommended. First, a planisphere. That is one navigation aid. And you can hit the adjustments on either side of this. Make this thing line up with the day and time, and it'll show you the correct idea. There is one. Thank you very much. Here's a star atlas. You can get one this size, which is a 6th magnitude atlas, or you can get this one, which is an 11th magnitude atlas. Which one do you think has more stars in it? The 11th magnitude. So the 6th magnitude is actually brighter than 11th magnitude, and so the dimmer you go, exponentially you have more stars that you have to keep track of, and that's what these two atlases. This one anyone can buy and use out in the field. This one looks great sitting on a shelf in your impressive home office. All right, now let's see if I had it somewhere. Thank you very much. All right, I need another volunteer. Can I have another volunteer? We can have the same volunteer if you want. Another volunteer to showcase this? Don't worry about it. We don't need to have any volunteers. I'll just hold this up. Tell me what is wrong. This is the planisphere, but it's blown up to highlight something specific. What is wrong with this planisphere? It's backwards. West and east are pointed in different directions. So I'm looking at this like this, and I'm going, why is this useful at all? I'm going to actually orient it to the north here, because I know the north is in that oops, I'm out of my, sorry everybody at home, I'm out of my box. I'm pointed towards the north here, and the east and west is in the wrong direction. What am I doing wrong? Because this should be useful if they printed it this way on purpose. And that's because east being that way, north being that way, in order to make it correct, I can't read it like a terrestrial map. I have to read it like a sky map that it is. So mentally, or as you begin, I would actually suggest you do it physically, that you orient it towards the sky like it was supposed to be in the first place. And that's why east and west are upside down, or backwards. The other side of the planisphere, they're actually north and south are upside down, but the same thing applies. It's all because you should be pointing up at the sky or reading it like you're reading the inside of the celestial sphere as opposed to the outside of the earth. Star Atlas apps are awesome. They have some limitations in that you're only going to see this much amount of the sky, whereas if you're looking at an atlas, you have the full sky covered, and it is very useful when you're actually trying to pick out objects at the beginning of the night. The sky atlas, you have to scroll through things and see what's going to be up and all that type of stuff. It makes it a little more difficult to organize your evening, but very, very useful anyway. This particular one is called Sky Safari. Stellarium and Sky Map are two others. All right, so what cool things can we see in the sky, especially with your first telescope? Well, if you get a, say, a Newtonian, an 8-inch Newtonian, which is an excellent starter scope, you'd be able to see all these objects. a lot of different types of objects. The moon, planets, stars, deep sky objects, which are not the moon, planets, or stars, but globular clusters, open clusters, nebulae, galaxies. You can see some of the outer planets. You can see asteroids, and you can see transient objects such as a comet or something like that. So what you might see, especially later on here, is that there's two catalogs that are predominantly used, but there are many catalogs you can use. You can use the Messier catalog, which is designated by an M number, or the NGC IC catalog, the New General Catalog or Index Catalog. What are these things? Messier was a astronomer back in he lived from 1730 to 1817. He was a comet hunter, and he made a list of objects, and that's all a catalog is a list of objects. However, ironically, Messier compiled this list so that you would, if you were a comet hunter, you wouldn't look at these objects. So we now use them to look at them, so almost the exact opposite purpose. And just a little bit of irony. However, I'm sure that he would just be pleased as punch that we're all looking at something in the sky. Originally, it had 103 objects. It now currently has 110 objects in it. The NGIC is a lot bigger. It was compiled by Dreyer. He lived from 1852 to 1926, and he built upon the work of the Herschel family. The New General Catalog, Index Catalog is its proper name, and it was originally contained 7,840 objects. It now had two major additions to it, which added another 5,386 objects. So you'd be busy with the NGC IC catalog for quite a while, and it has been revived since a number of times. It's now called the revised NGC IC. The Messier catalog, there's actually a marathon in the spring that happens. At the spring, it becomes doable, although difficult, to see the entire Messier catalog in one night through your telescope. So now we get to the fun part where we can see various pictures. This was actually taken through the current scope that I bought tonight, that I have with a cell phone. So just seeing that amount of detail on the moon with a very imprecise and very amateurish method is already impressive. Looking at stars, you can see the various magnitudes. These are stars, and this is also a star. One of them is a lot brighter than the rest of them. And actually, part of learning how to drive your telescope is picking out these bright stars, finding them, and seeing, understanding what you're looking at. This right here is a little bit of amateur astronomy, showing you that this is actually Albireo. This is a double star, and you might see in other lectures that astronomers look at the light coming from stars and can tell a bunch of stuff about it. You're probably in your head going, they're all white. Why can they tell anything about those stars? And that's not true. Visually, with these stars looking through a telescope, you can tell there's a difference in color between those two stars. So you don't have to think it's a crazy instrument or it's some type of baloney. It isn't. You can visually tell with your eyes that different stars have different colors. The outer planets, disk resolution. This is actually, you can't see a whole detail on it, but I could tell immediately when I found this object. This is not my photograph, but when I found this object the first time myself, that you could see that it was a planet I was looking on, because it wasn't a star anymore. It got bigger and fuzzier. when I looked at it, and that through the telescope, and that's actually Neptune, and it's a very cool color too. All right, everyone's favorite subject, math. And I'm going to avoid using my props anymore because it is getting too dark to use them. So, but they're in here anyway. Magnification equals focal length telescope over focal length of eyepiece. So remember that number I said was written on the side of the eyepieces? So you take your focal length from your telescope, which is in the literature for your telescope, and you divide it by the focal length of your eyepiece, and whammo, you have the magnification. Very easy. Then you just take the result of that, and you multiply the apparent field of view of your eyepiece that your manufacturer of your eyepiece told you about, and now you have your true field of view. You now have all the math you need to create an eyepiece chart for your telescope. What does that help you with? Well, everything in the sky, its size is measured by what's called the angular size. So here's an observer looking at this angle of this object from one end of the object to another, because we don't know how big that object is unless we do some sophisticated math or look it up in a chart, but we can measure its angle. How do we do that? Well, we have our true field of view from that calculation. And if we know our true field of view, say for instance in this example was a degree across, we know that that object, because it looks like it fits 4 times across that eyepiece, is maybe a quarter of that, which would be 15 minutes of arc. So we know that object is approximately 15 minutes of arc. And then we could use that information to pick out another eyepiece, one that maybe zooms in better but encapsulates the whole view. Likewise, if we're using somebody else's telescope or somebody else's eyepiece and we have no idea how big it is, but we know the size of the object, then we can back calculate our specs on either the eyepiece or the telescope. All right, let's talk a little bit about coordinate systems. The alt-az we talked about as an alt-az mount, but what does that mean? Azimuth is how far east of north you are in degrees, as sitting here on Earth, or altitude is how far above the horizon you are in degrees. Now these degrees are the ones you're familiar with in geometry. Right ascension and declination. Right ascension is how far east of Aquarius you are. Remember, this is located on the sky and moves with the sky. So that object, whatever you're looking at, has a coordinate system that doesn't depend upon your telescope and what direction you're looking at when you're looking at the object. It depends only on the object itself, because the coordinate system is on the sky. So it's how far east you are of Aquarius in hours of right ascension. Now, instead of an arc minute or an arc second, this hour of right ascension also has minutes and seconds. They are not arc minutes and arc seconds. They are minutes and seconds of right ascension. They are not equivalent, and they threw that in there just to make it complicated for the rest of us. Obviously, 2 legacy coordinate systems clashing might have a little bit of confusion associated with it. Declination is how far you are above the equator in degrees, similar to altitude, except it's on the equator as opposed to being the horizon. Azimuth to right ascension actually has this conversion factor. There's 15 degrees per hour or 15 arc minutes per minute of right ascension. One more technique we're going to talk about tonight. But I have a go-to. I just bought that complicated computer telescope. Yeah, you're not going to be able to avoid star hopping fully. You will have to know at least alignment stars, and you will have to know how, if I'm off a little bit from my object, I'll have to know a little bit about, I can see the stars here, I think I'm here, I need to move it in this direction. So you need at least the basics of star hopping in order to use even a computer mount. You'll learn the sky much better knowing star hopping, and besides, finding objects this way is fun. So here's Bob. It's an imaginary constellation. I drew Bob here with this field of view, and that's interesting because on a star chart, this is the object here. This is M401K. Bob is the accountant. That is his constellation name, and he has, of course, the object we want to look at, M401K, is actually in the pocket protector position on the accountant. Now, this constellation, of course, is completely fanciful. But right here, we can see this field of view. We can see that this larger star, which means it's brighter, is next to these two stars right next to each other, a double star. And what we can learn is that if we can find stars there, then we know where we are when we're pointing in the sky at Bob. We know we're here. We know that if we move this field of view up this way, and then over here to the object we're interested in seeing, that we've successfully star hopped to the correct position. And that is all that is involved in star hopping. Here's a real life example. This is the Ring Nebula, this is the star Vega, and this is Lyra, the constellation. It's actually a pretty simple star hop from Vega, a very bright star, 1, 2, and then halfway in between these two stars, a little bit closer to Vega, in this parallelogram, is the Ring Nebula. We're almost done. Here's some homework. I suggest reading any of these books. They're all great books. I've at least paged through them and read most of these books. Join an astronomy club. Okay, so here's the reading list. You can write this down, or you can go to my online form of this presentation, which will be up on later tonight on the on our website, and you can go get that information from there. But if you want to take a picture, no problem.
Yeah, you can check out our YouTube. We have all our past presentations archived there, so you'll be able to get not only this but any other sources that he uses, and you can pause him. Or you can mute him if you so desire.
Highly recommended. All right, astrophotography and EAA, it's the other really effective way to gather light. There are plenty of astrophotographers out there today, so please go take a look at what they're doing. And we do have some presentations on astrophotography. The complexity and expense is at a whole nother level. So not only would you be buying a telescope and, say, eyepieces, but you need a camera and a computer and various other devices. Electronically assisted astronomy is like astrophotography light, sort of like the Polaroid of the photography business, of the astrophotography business. You're surrounded by, like I said, skilled astrophotographers here. Ask questions. And here's some things that you could see. This is my own EAA. That's the Crystal Ball Nebula. That's the Whirlpool Galaxy. This is all taken here, by the way. What's that? I did take these myself. This is the Moon. This is Saturn. This is Caroline's Rose. You can see the rose pattern. This is an open cluster of stars. You can sort of see a rose pattern in there. This is the Intergalactic Wanderer. This is a very interesting object. It is 274,600 light years away, further than the extent of our galaxy. This is the Ring Nebula. Oops. And I included the Ring Nebula last on purpose because I have my own telescope set up there, and I showed you all how to star hop. So I'm issuing our public a challenge. Come over to my telescope, and I challenge you to find the Ring Nebula. Don't worry, I will help. And we get a lot of people who are afraid to touch and manipulate the telescopes. Be a little brave. Give it a shot. Please.
Ask first, because some of the people running don't appreciate. Always ask.
Specifically, I'm issuing the challenge for you guys to find it on my scope. So come find me, Paul, in order to do it on my scope. And that is the last slide. Thank you, everyone, for listening through that.
All right. Thank you, Paul. So we are doing a question and answer session. But first, since I saw a number of you sneaking in during the presentation, we must do the safety briefing. It's even more important now that it's actually dark. So if you do need to use the restroom, that is the porta potty in the back to my left, your right. That is illuminated by red for ease of finding in the dark, and also to allow you to kind of see in the dark box. We have a museum area and gift shop, which I will be manning after question and answer. I can't man it now because can't be in two places at once, as much as I wish I could split myself into two people. When we go to leave, we are using our headlights. We do not want to get run over. We do not want to fill out paperwork about getting run over. So let's just avoid that problem entirely. If we have any flashlights as we're moving around, do keep those lights pointed towards the ground. We don't need to accidentally blind someone and have them lose their night vision, because we are having flashlight raves in the parking lot. With that, we are going to start the question and answer session with our first online question. Were the science people who got put on house arrest over the whole change in model thing extroverted or introverted? Because one of them would find it torture to be stuck in their house all the time, and the other's like, yes, I have an excuse not to deal with people.
Considering that they were under penalty of death, I think they were more worried about being executed and making sure that their maybe that their scientific ideas did not die, but at the same time they did not agitate the powers that be at that time any further. It was not a friendly time for science living during those years. Science and some of the powers that be were just not compatible at that time.
All right. So were there any questions out there? Perfect. I see one waving their hands about, and that's important because I am night blind. I've been looking at a
Paul, you said earlier with the eyepieces, you're talking about exit pupil. So if I just give you a theoretical, let's say you're looking at Jupiter and you have an exit pupil of 10 millimeters and your eye's 6 millimeters. What do you see? Are you just missing like the top and bottom of Jupiter at that point?
No. So it's the distance that you need to be away from it, not the distance of the width of the image.
Okay.
So it's actually hard. Exit pupil comes into a lot of importance because naturally we'll move forward and back if it's our own eye we're looking through, but if you have to move the lens of a camera or your glasses are getting in the way, that's when you'll really notice exit pupil.
All right, so our next online question, people online, you have it easy, you can just type. I realized I didn't go over it for people here. I'm night blind. I've been staring at a phone screen which is lit up, which is why sometimes apps are not the best thing to use. Completely night blind. So when you raise your hand, you have to do like the gentleman in blue did and wave it about just like you don't care until I get to you with the microphone. Because if you stop and put your hand down, you blend in and you become one with the void of darkness. I'm a T-Rex. My vision's based on motion. So our next online question. If you were to buy eyepieces, would you be better off buying the eyepieces singularly or like in the kits vendors like Celestron have?
I think unless you know that you can use a good bit of that kit to buy them singularly, especially if you're just starting out, might be the best way to do it. Of course, some of these things come up on the used market for a good bargain, so I'm not scaring you away from getting a good bargain. Or if you're, really already chugging along in your hobby, but I think an individual investments might make a little more sense, especially since you have the option of, say, Barlow's. A Barlow will multiply whatever eyepiece you have by whatever that Barlow is. For instance, you can easily get a 2 times Barlow. Now, instead of one eyepiece, you have with a Barlow effectively 2. However, if you buy 2 eyepieces of different size, now you have 4 eyepieces thanks to that Barlow. So I would take maybe a little more conservative approach to buying eyepieces.
Right. Was there another question out here? I hear crickets and other excited children over there. And I see a lot of pointing, I think, but not necessarily hand raised. So our next online question is, do you have to make an eyepiece chart or is that just helpful?
That's just helpful. The Sky Atlases, and so as you get more sophisticated, you might move into some guiding or some electronic steering of your telescope. Those programs will put those reticules up on your Sky Atlas by themselves. You just have to input the information for your telescope. It will do that division for you. Not that it's a tremendous help, but at least you don't have to do that little bit of math. And then it'll actually put those right onto your Sky Atlas, so you can actually see the stars you should be seeing through your eyepiece.
All right, question out here. All right, so last call online. Get your questions in. If you have a question, I always like to give them a little extra bit because stream delay is a thing. By the time they get that message, we've already moved on to the next question. And that next question is, for right ascension and declination, why did they choose Aquarius as a marker and not like the pole star or something else? Why Aquarius?
I can't tell you why. That's an excellent question. If I had to guess, and this is just a guess, so don't take it as, but we do have various lines of such as used to be called Greenwich Mean Time. I'm sure it's called something else now. But we have arbitrary, based on the history, lines that we've determined that's the standard, that's from where we begin. And they usually have some sort of significance based on modern navigation, the history of modern navigation, or in this case, probably based on some sort of decision about, say, the vernal equinox, something like that. And we just decided, okay, we're beginning here at the vernal equinox.
All right, questions? All right, so, and Dan actually yelled at me personally for that last question, saying Polaris, the pole star, is like the only thing you can't use for right ascension because it's straight up. There's no right of it. It's just there.
It's actually about a half a degree off the North Celestial Pole. So if you were to take the Earth's pole and point it directly at the up, you are just a little bit off the North Star. The North Star actually, by a little bit, goes around the North Celestial Pole at night. It's close.
It's probably back then that was pretty close to spot on.
It's an excellent way to begin lining up your telescope. And Dan, of course, I'm saying that to everybody. Dan's an accomplished astrophotographer and gives his own talks on these subjects, and he's very aware of that difference.
All right, so our next online question: how can I tell whether a telescope for sale? I'm assuming this is like if you find it on Facebook Marketplace or like eBay or a yard sale, whether it's worth buying or is it just a piece of garbage?
So I would definitely buy some, or not buy, but somehow acquire. But buy is one typical way to get it. Some sort of a beginner's guide to astronomy, and they will typically recommend a good starter rig. And as long as you are somewhere in that vicinity, of that starter rig, you're probably not going to go wrong. However, I would have a look through it before you actually purchase it, just to make sure that something isn't out of whack when you look through it. So ask whoever you're buying it from whether you can set it up and take a look through it. But definitely, in general, I would steer away from the real low investment, a couple of $100, $100 or less. Those are toys for young kids, and then but you might want to.
There are some cheap that will be okay and won't kill the hobby for you.
Right.
But you do have. He does have a point, and we do have a talk online about that.
The frustration being that if you buy too low end, you don't end up getting to see much in the way of cool things, and it might be frustrating for you. You want enough of an investment. But certainly my first telescope was an 8-inch Newtonian, and that telescope was sufficient for me to see so many cool things, and that was less than $1,000. Even though it was a push-to, not a go-to, but a push-to telescope. It had that capability, and it was still, and I bought that new, so it's still a relatively modest investment that yielded really good results.
Oh, I see a question out here. Perfect.
It's not a question. It's my own personal experience when it comes to buying equipment.
Mm-hmm.
I bought my first telescope was a cheap refractor on a cheap tripod. It was a miserable experience. Didn't touch it for a couple of years. And I bought a good Newtonian on a cheap tripod. And while it had nice optics, I couldn't see anything because the thing was all over the place. So that was a bad experience too. So the tripod is also just as important as the optics, or if in some cases probably maybe more important. So.
Yeah, I would even recommend that the Newtonian Dob is probably
one of the nicer beginner friendly.
One of the nicest ways to begin amateur astronomy. It's just the alt-az mount is very easy to figure out, even though it doesn't do everything that that you might want to as an experienced astronomer. However, it's very excellent for a beginner to learn, and all that. It's not by any means a bad construction, but it's a cheaper, it's a more value-oriented construction, and you can get them for a reasonable amount of money. Thank you for your experience.
A few things, if you are going to go ahead and purchase something, is it missing parts? What if you look down the tube at the mirrors? Do the mirrors look like they're full of crud? and other various dust and garbage.
Yeah, I'd definitely put my
And does
hands
it
on
look
as
like
well.
it'll fall over if you give it a stern look? If it looks like it might blow over, if you think about there being wind in the next week, perhaps it's not for you.
Yeah, you just use common horse sense for buying anything new, but definitely put your eyes through it first. And like I said, if you'll get these same recommendations if you purchase a beginner's guide first before investing.
So hypothetically speaking, uh, say you jumped the gun, you saw a telescope for like $100.
We've all done it. I like I said it. Typically, they recommend you wait a full year. I certainly did not wait a full year before investing in an actual telescope. But go ahead, sir.
Oh,
I was gonna say, so what do we do with that telescope then? Is it like worth keeping around, or just like abandon it?
No, don't abandon what you've already invested in. If your zero is now, there's no sense in going and reinvesting in something else, right? So you want to your biggest value is using what you already have. However, it depends upon. May I ask if you have if this friend of yours, I'm being kind, if you or whoever invested in the telescope, what telescope do they have? What type of mount?
it's a tripod.
A tripod. Very small. You might have a smaller, not a hobby scope, but maybe more of a younger person's beginner type of scope. That that you can might be able to point that at the planets and be able to see something interesting, but you're really not going to see deep sky objects with a small scope like that.
Does it look like this? It looks like this. So don't throw it out. Find your local astronomy club. Chances are it's not going to be great, but it can be usable if you have someone knowledgeable guiding you. If you are like me and sitting in front of the directions going, I understand none of this, you will want to throw it out. At that point, if you have decided that telescope is not for you, and you can either list it on Facebook Marketplace or whatever, but you can, chances are, also donate that to the local astronomy club, and they always have someone who is willing to take these scopes.
This is a fork type mount. It's an alt-az mount. And so it wouldn't be frustrating for you to learn from this one. But like I said, the moon and the planets are going to be your objects to see through this one. Deep sky objects are going to be less than fulfilling through this, if you can even necessarily find them. Some of the things like Andromeda, maybe you'll be able to see the center of Andromeda through that. Any of the other maybe binocular type of objects you can see, might see through that, but you're not going to get great views through a telescope like this. So don't throw it out. Point at those objects, learn, and then but your next investment should be a little more robust, so to say. But don't throw never throw an object you can learn from out, especially if it's a fork mount and it's an alt-az type of mount. They're easy to learn. Knock yourself out with it.
Yeah, it's just like I said, you might have better luck if you find that knowledgeable person to guide you than trying to read a book on it and do it yourself. Because not gonna lie, I had something like this as a kid, and I got tossed in the dumpster because I couldn't even find the moon, and yeet.
Yeah, I did a lot of self-study, but I just, that's me. That's how I learn from reading and from books. Somebody else helping you is always helpful. I've learned a lot about astrophotography and other tips here also. So it also depends on your learning style. Certainly, though, what Kim is saying about join an astronomy club, just being around smart people, some of the smart is bound to rub off on you, and there's some really smart hobby, and I'm not including myself in that category.
Right. So it looks like our online questions have ended. Were there any last minute questions out here? Right. With that, thank you, Paul, for a great talk. Thank you, everyone here who's joined us, not only in person but online. And with that, clearer skies and better seeing.
All right. Thanks, everyone.